Catherine Cuellar,
Hi, Ward Richmond.
welcome to Truckin' On.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure's all mine.
We both have pretty busy schedules.
We do, and I thank you for your flexibility and patience in scheduling this because I know that I had to reschedule more than once. And for that, I am sorry, but I didn't want work to get in the way of our work together. So
I appreciate that. And we were just about to get to this before we started, where we met.
I met you as a senior at Woodrow Wilson High School when I was a reporter for the Dallas Morning News, reporting on the musical Crazy for You.
Oh my, I do vaguely remember that now. It's all coming back.
That was my first career, was journalism
And
in the
you were-
1900s.
So did you put two and two together and figure that out, or do you just remembered meeting
remember
me when
you.
I was in high school?
I remember that story because I think I was an intern at the Morning News at that time, and that led to my staff writer job there. But also, I remembered meeting you then, and then when our paths crossed in other musical circles, because I was writing about music for the Dallas Morning News for many a year and the arts. And I started their arts and entertainment online guide when the internet was a brand new thing. And people were mostly dialing up at home and using high-speed surfing at work to goof off. So
Yeah, I do remember this energetically. I can't picture it perfectly, but those were great times at Woodrow.
we've slept and drunk since then. So there's a lot of things I don't remember. But the earlier in my life is sharper in some ways than the middle.
I don't know. The recent is the sharpest for me. So,
That's a blessing too.
yeah, that is a blessing. And yeah, I think back sometimes. I wrote a book during the pandemic, just an autobiography, a memoir. I'm still working on it, but that really helped me with a lot of memories. Like trying to just write down everything I could remember was my first step in writing that. And then going back and kind of analyzing my decisions. And then the more you go back through it, then it's like, oh, I forgot about this. Or I'll mention some funny story I thought of to a friend, and they're like, well, remember this one, and this one. Like, oh my gosh, totally forgot. But starting to piece it all together. So what'd you think about Crazy for You?
As high school musicals go, Woodrow's is deservedly famous. I mean, they have incredible community buy-in. Like when they do Singing in the Rain, they actually built a stage that rained indoors in the high school auditorium. And I also just remember everybody who auditioned had a part. So there was always like one gigantic song and dance number where every kid on the high school was on stage with jazz hands and smiles. And that was remarkable and special.
It was so cool. I feel like I felt like it was a little nerdy when I was a freshman in high school, and I did not, I didn't do choir. But then I watched the musical and really just, my soul took over and like, you've got to do this. So I auditioned for Variations, the show choir, in the spring of my freshman year, somehow made it. And
what was your
the rest is
uniform
history.
for Variations?
We
Did
had-
it involve a vest and a bow tie?
Oh yeah, red vest, bow tie. I think we did cummerbunds in middle school at J.L. Long show choir. And yeah, we had the red vest and the red bow tie. Variations.
I still love choir. I actually am going back to my college to sing a choir concert this spring under the direction of a college classmate of mine who is younger than me and now the conductor of all our college's choirs. So
Wow. Yeah, Miss Bircher, our teacher, she just passed away last year. So we went to her funeral. John Pedigo and I went together, and we all got on stage with all my old schoolmates and sang Rhythm of Life, which is what we closed every performance out with the show choir. And so there were just, probably like 2 decades of people that were up there on stage. It was really cool. It was like one of the most just like emotional funerals I ever went to. And I didn't know anything about her story, but hearing it all and then just being there with all of the people I went to high school with, like, that were above me and below me. And it was just really special. So I love that time. So let's get to the Catherine Cuellar story.
oh my word.
I like to start ages 12 to 22. So tell me about where you were at then. Feel free to go earlier if you'd like.
So I am 5'10 3/4". I say I'm 6 feet tall, but not quite. But I'm wearing shoes, so I'm mostly 6 feet most of the time. And I've been this tall since I was 12.
Wow.
So that is the defining characteristic of my adolescence and young womanhood, is that I was the tallest person in junior high, student, teacher, or otherwise. You can find me back row middle in every picture. And people quite literally looked up to me. So they thought I knew what I was doing, but I didn't dissuade them from that. But of course, I did not have the wisdom or the life experience required, but I did act like a boss. So I had a lot of leadership opportunities through my church. I was kind of a wild child at my school.
And you were in Dallas?
I was in Dallas. My family has been in Dallas for more than 100 years.
Okay. And yeah, maybe go back a little bit because of your family.
Sure.
The El Chico family, as I think of them.
Well, my dad's family is the El Chico family. My grandparents started El Chico restaurants at the corner of Oak Lawn and Lemon. And my dad's parents moved to Shreveport to open El Chico's there, then came back in 1945 and opened the El Chico at Lovers and Inwood by the Inwood Movie Theater, where the Caruth family was told they were nuts to put a restaurant there because no one would ever drive that far north to eat. But my mom's dad is also a native-born Dallasite. He went to Forest Avenue High School, which is now Madison on Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. He was young when Fair Park was built. He went to SMU, served in World War II, met my grandmother on a triple blind date. My grandmother's roommate had a boyfriend who set my grandmother and their other roommate up on a blind date with two guys who had just returned home from World War II. And the other guy on that date was what we then called shell-shocked and would now call PTSD. So he got into a barroom brawl, got tossed into jail. My grandfather knew of a dice game upstairs from the Highland Park Pharmacy where he could get the cash to bail his buddy out of jail because there were no ATMs in the 1940s in Dallas, Texas. And my grandmother was really impressed by how resourceful my grandfather was, so she decided to give him another date. And my mom was born 9 months to the day after they got married. So,
wow.
Yes, she went to Hillcrest High School. My dad went to Jesuit. They met in college for my mom, grad school for my dad, got married at Christ the King Catholic Church. And the gang's all still here. I see my folks, my parents, my sister, her kids every week. And we don't have restaurants in our family anymore, but Dallas geography is the three-dimensional map of all my memories, and I'm kind of a time traveler now because when I'm going down a street, I'm remembering everything that happened on that street in my teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and now my 50s.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, and we've seen Dallas just change from being this, what I thought was just like a normal city. When I went to college at the time I met you, like 1996, people were like, "You're from Dallas. Do you ride horses to your school?" I'm like, "No, it's a city." I mean, it was a city, but now it's like, I say it's like LA without the beach or the mountains.
Yes. And outside of Dallas, I've lived in LA and I've lived in New York. And yeah, when I moved to LA in the early 2000s, LA felt like it was Dallas 10 years in the future. And I used to say Atlanta was Dallas 10 years in the past until the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. And then Atlanta in some ways kind of leapfrogged over Dallas. But and
then I think it happened again, like Dallas is now
back on top,
primely back on top, on its way to overtake Chicago, is what we say in the commercial real estate business.
Yes, we do. And having been born into a family of restaurateurs, I worked mightily to not go into the family restaurant business. But the irony is I now work in convention and event services in the nighttime economy and responsible hospitality division. So I'm helping all the restaurateurs in town navigate the city's permitting processes, because nobody opens a restaurant because they have a burning desire for a fire code inspection or a certificate of occupancy or a parking lot minimum. And so working on that is a meaningful way to kind of continue the work of supporting entrepreneurs that began with my grandparents without actually having to sling hash or work evenings, nights, and weekends in the restaurant, locking up and opening before sunrise.
Yeah. It's amazing job. I think everyone should wait tables in their life at least once. And I worked at the All Good.
I recall.
We hung out a lot back
yes,
then.
I ate at the All Good and went to many shows at the All Good. Mm-hmm. Still go to eat at the All Good. Although I can't think of the last show I saw there. Maybe Lucky Pierre's. In any event,
I'm playing there on Thursday, actually. Going back to the stage. I still get together with Mike. But yeah, it's a tough business, but I don't know. I look back on it so fondly. I say often that if real estate just stopped working out for me suddenly and I had to go pay the bills, I would happily go back to waiting tables. I might not go to the All Good though.
Well, and one of the things that I'm also working on is our tourism and hospitality workforce pipeline. So as we're growing as a region, we're attracting more international patrons and audiences and events, including next year's World Cup, which I'm working on. And as you know, having been in the service industry, there's an inflection point in a lot of servers' careers. I call it tips versus title. And you're getting good cash as a server. You get a chance to be a manager or supervisor, which might actually be a pay cut and a bummer because then you have to, hold your friends to account.
Yeah.
But if you decline that promotional opportunity early in your career, you are foregoing the security and options that servers don't have. So we're trying to work with our public colleges and universities here in Dallas, Paul Quinn College, Dallas College, and UNT Dallas to educate their students in all majors, that all majors are needed in tourism and hospitality. Because there is a commercial real estate component, there is a finance component, there is a logistics component and a transportation component and on, so that we can grow our local workforce to stay here and lead our tourism and hospitality ecosystem and not lose our local talent to other places.
Real estate's very similar because I work and have worked my entire career as a 100% commission-based broker. And then they have the managerial roles within our I'm in a huge company, Collier's, and we have offices everywhere. And it's the same thing. You can go get a salary, but you can't make as much as you can if you're a really good broker, as a manager, typically. So it's interesting. When I worked at the All Good, Mike wanted me to be the manager, and I was like, no, I don't want any responsibility during this stage of my life other than like managing my band. So where did you go to school where you were the tallest one in all of the school?
I went to Prestonwood Elementary, the public Prestonwood in Richardson ISD,
okay,
Park Hill Junior High, and Pierce High School.
Okay.
And my niece and nephew, who are also quite tall, are now at Prestonwood Elementary and Pierce High School. And my nephew's the third generation of our family to go to Pierce High School. So
that's cool.
It's pretty cool. I am going to way more football games as a proud auntie than I did as a student because he's in the marching band. So you were talking about thinking musical theater was not cool. I was a choir kid. My nephew's a band kid. I'm overjoyed that is where he has found his people, and the pride of seeing him make art is quite inspiring.
I still do. I do a scholarship at Woodrow, so I get to go and be a little bit of that community. But my kids now go to Hexter over here. And their mom lives in Lake Highlands, so we might move them to Lake Highlands. We'll see. But I got a text from a guy I played football with, and he's interviewing for the head coaching job at Woodrow. So it's just living in East Dallas is cool like that. Did you know John Altschuler?
Yes, very well. He and I grew up on the same block of the same street.
Really?
Yes, we were in high school, and he's a friend now.
I would assume so.
But I have been, as with many handsome gentlemen in my life, I'm often better friends with their parents than with them. So
really?
Yes. So I always had a warm and friendly relationship with his parents, Pat and Stan. And now as an adult, he and I are able to be friends, but he was way too cool in high school to acknowledge that we were neighbors and friends.
He's such a man about downtown Dallas that I would imagine you cross paths quite a bit.
Quite often. Yes. No, he's a great guy. And he's also, even when I lived in New York City and he and his kids would be up there in the city, we would get together, go to the news stand, which as a former ink-stained wretch from the Dallas Morning News, I appreciate people who still support the print media.
Oh, yeah. He posts it on Instagram all the time and highlights it and writes letters to the editor. So
yes. My father is also a newspaper and magazine highlighter. So
yeah, love it.
if I'm at my parents' house and I pick a magazine, I can tell if my dad's read it because it's already highlighted, which makes it easier for me to scan the articles.
Yeah. He's an early guest of Truckin' On.
Right on. I'll have to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, it's good. So high school, you did choir. Was that your main thing?
I did choir at church and yearbook at school. So I did not know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Even until college, I waited as long as possible. I went to a liberal arts college, Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
And I produced concerts there and wrote about music for the Alt Weekly in Memphis, which is the Memphis Flyer, not unlike the Observer here, or the Met when the Met was around. I started producing concerts in high school. Actually, I produced Rhett Miller and Murray Hammond in my high school cafeteria as a benefit for my high school's Amnesty International chapter, and continued to produce concerts for my classmates through the Student Activities Board of our student government. And it was then I realized that concert production was high-risk gambling for a living, and I needed more sleep than that job allowed because I would be picking up beer cans in the middle of the night after a show, and that was for the birds. So I got a good taste of that early enough to know I wanted to do something adjacent, but not that. So I majored in English, sang in choir in college, toured Europe with my college choir twice, France after my freshman year. And
alto? Were you an alto?
You know it.
Yeah. I mean, I know things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Second alto, tenor sometimes even. And started writing about music for the Dallas Morning News after Michael Corcoran left to Austin in 1995. So I was an undergrad writing for 2 newspapers in Memphis and Dallas, and then graduated college and had a summer internship at the Dallas Morning News that turned into a full-time job. So that was my entree to journalism. And then I backed from features into hard news because I had some experience with the internet when the internet was a brand new thing. That took me out to Los Angeles. And then I was working at a public radio station called KCRW that is both news and music. And I was there on 9/11. So I got pulled into the newsroom. I volunteered, actually, because I knew they had been working their tails off. And I said, by the way, I used to work at a newspaper. Can I help? And they were like, absolutely. We have a news meeting at 7 a.m. Please be here then. And that ended up being the best radio newsroom in Los Angeles during those years from 9/11 through the start of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
So what do you do in that position?
So I was an associate producer. So for music, bands would come into the studio and I would be taking calls from listeners. For news, that entailed a 7 a.m. discussion of what was going to be on our news program, which was during the noon hour, lunch hour. And there are blocks of time in a show, as you know, like this show.
Yeah.
Your introductory block, your concluding block. Those were the 2 blocks I worked on primarily. So the big meat in the middle of the show was like a 3-panel interview, 3-person panel discussion usually. But the opening and closing segments were booked based on the news of the day. So we would have conversations about
what's newsworthy.
What's newsworthy today? What do we want to open the show with? What do we want to close the show with? And then figuring out who is available in 4 hours to be on our show for 7 minutes. And if our show was an hour long, our host read about 60 pages to get ready for the show, about a page a minute. So for my 7 or 8 minute segments, I would print out 8 pages of articles for him about whoever I had booked for him to talk to. I would highlight it for him so that he could scan it quickly.
Yeah.
I would write questions for him to ask. He could listen to the person he was talking to and let it go anywhere. But the job of a good producer, as you know, is to never have the talent searching for what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
So he had a screen up in front of him in the studio, and I would be feeding him questions throughout so that if ever the conversation took a direction he was not expecting, he could look at the screen and get another question. And then I would indicate when time was almost up and then go on about my day.
That's intense.
It is.
I know I do that here to a degree with the podcast, but it's so loose and we're just going with the flow. And it also I have the ability to edit, although I don't do it very often, but at least I know that I do. But that's just intense. And then you're changing and you're really going with the news. I've set this podcast up nicely from the production side because I ask everyone the same 15 questions. So that gets me pretty comfortable as an interviewer who's never been an interviewer until 2 years ago. But interesting to think about. How was LA?
LA is a great place to spend your early years. It was still relatively cheap when I lived there, and I made great friends for life. I hosted a potluck dinner, and I had friends and family who said, "Oh, you're moving to Los Angeles. I know someone there. You should give them a ring." And I called every last person to a person that anyone said I should call. And I said, "Hey, I'm having a potluck on Sunday. Our friend Ward says we should meet. This is my address. Come over if you so desire." And the core group of friends that I have to this day are people who got that message on their answering machine and came to the potlucks. And being a frugal side hustler with multiple part-time jobs, I could also then make the leftovers from the potluck last a good part of the week.
That's amazing. I was just talking to someone who moved here late into adulthood and just like, how do you go make friends when you move to Dallas, Texas, other than work, you know? And the potluck dinner, call all of your friends and find out who lives there. That's a great idea.
It was wonderful. And church, I went to a church and made great friends for life there too. And work. I mean, the people I worked with at that radio station were very dear to me. And so those were kind of my main 3 ways of making friends. But my first year, I had like a zillion part-time jobs. Yeah. I was a publicist for Past Their Prime nostalgia tours, Sheila E., Chicago, Roxette. I was a Hollywood reporter going to junkets, interviewing the movie actors for films that were opening who would get like propped up in a director's chair and do dozens of interviews a day in a hotel room. And I would get to ask them the same 3 to 5 questions that everybody had been asking them all day, but I was doing it for Yahoo. I addressed envelopes. I have very good handwriting, so I could address invitations. Charged $1 an envelope for wedding invitations because there's like the inner envelope and the outer. Yeah, I worked for a games website, which has since gone the way of all flesh. It was kind of a early competitor to like an Amazon or maybe even more like a Blockbuster, but it was CD and video game reviews that I was writing and editing. And I think I got the job because I walked in and they had a wall-sized cover of the old 97's Too Far to Care. Dude, and I was like,
I know those guys.
I do indeed. And they were like, "You know them?" I'm like, "Yeah, real well." So Rhett's grandmother and my grandmother had cocktails together every month from the 1940s till they died.
Did they really?
They really did.
That's
Booze
cool.
and news was their circle of friends. So anyway, so I also wrote 200 music trivia questions a week for an online gaming website. And then I was working for KCRW at the front desk, sorting mail, answering and screening phone calls. And I had never paid state income tax before. So April 15th rolled around, and I had been doing all these jobs, all 1099, no taxes withheld. And I had less than $100 left after that. And I was like, well, it's been a good year in LA. I have a gas card, so I guess that'll pay my way back to Dallas. But I made a commitment to the high school students at my church to chaperone them on a volunteer trip to Mexico for their spring break. So I was like, okay, I'll go to Mexico and then I'll come back and move to Texas.
Wow.
And while I was in Mexico, the radio station where I had been volunteering at the front desk left a message that one of their producers was trailing a spouse to a new job out of state, and they had a producer opening, and would I please apply for that job? And so I applied, and that kept me in LA a couple of years more.
There you go. I had the same thing happen to me with the federal income tax. I didn't know. I'd been playing in my band. Like, I really didn't make any money. So, then when I started in real estate, the first year I made money, then the tax bill came, and it was all that I saved went right into it. And that was the last time that happened. Learned how to set aside. I say all the time, like, why don't they teach us that in school? Like, these fundamental things like that. And my kids are in school now, and I help them with stuff. And some of the things that are on this curriculum are the same as they were when I was there. And it's like, what about the real life stuff that people need to know? Like paying taxes, how to create wealth, how to invest. And you can do, like what a 401k is, how to do public speaking, these things. How to dress.
Yeah. And so we're trying to teach some of that right now through our tourism and hospitality internship program in the Convention and Event Services Department of the City of Dallas. But also, I mean, the best high school class I took was actually, from a life experience perspective, a home economics class called Single Survival. And it was all these things to do, like how to fill out an application for an apartment, how to cook meals for one, how to do a load of laundry, and why you needed to keep the reds out of your whites.
Yeah.
And, like
things like that.
Just super duper basic, like how to make a household budget, how to stay within your budget. And yeah, that was, I had a teacher who was a smoker. And so she would come in, take attendance, and then go outside to smoke. And I would often like slide into class because it was my first class of the day after she had taken attendance, but while she was out for a smoke, and I could like make myself present on time before she came back from her smoke.
That's nice. Were you a good student?
Yes, and school comes easily for me. Testing comes easily for me. So I learned early to be lazy and negotiated my way out of some things. Like if I made hundreds on the tests, I got to skip the daily assignments. I had different teachers for different classes in elementary school because I had good grades, so they wanted me to skip a grade. I was already young for my grade, and my grandparents were like, let her be a kid. She's already, 5'11" and weighs 80 pounds. So not really, but it felt like that. So I definitely would work ahead and then goof off.
Yeah.
I could do all the reading and then I could goof off. And I'm just goofy. Like, so.
I'm
yes.
goofy.
Yes.
I feel that.
So, and it's also really funny when you're partying, that like, as long as your grades stay up, you can get away with anything.
Yeah. I negotiated my way through high school and college period, like not by doing well on the tests, just doing well at football. But then I just became a really good negotiator, and that worked well. Just go to the office hours.
Yes,
like say,
I'm still friends with my professors.
I really need to pass this test. I just really need to, and I don't really understand it, but it will really help me a lot. And then cross my fingers.
I even made friends with, like, one of my dear friends to this day was my econ professor, and I was one of the few non-econ majors he invited to his retirement party just because he was a good guy, and he was the faculty sponsor for the daily newspaper at our college. So
that's cool.
Yeah. Going back to homecoming at my college now, I'm friends with more professors than my fellow students.
You have this trend going on.
Yeah.
You're an old soul. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just like a people-pleasing perfectionist nerd. I love learning. The best thing about working for the city of Dallas is I've learned new things every single day I've worked there.
Do you like a 4:30 p.m. dinner?
You know it.
I do.
I call that AARP dinner hour. And when my sweet spouse, who's a recording engineer, and I were dating, I was working for the electric utility Encore, and he was working in the studio. So often 4:30 would be the end of my work day. We would have dinner, and then he would go to work.
I like that. Our team at work, we do extreme. We don't go 4:30. That's a little too early, but right at 5 or 5:30.
Yes.
You can get great reservations too.
You can, and you can order off the happy hour menu.
And that's just, there's so many positives about it.
Yes.
Go to bed early.
I am a big fan of going to bed early.
Yeah.
I think about, so I've also been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 16 years. And now when I wake up, last night I woke up and I thought it was the middle of the night and it was not yet midnight. And I was laughing at my like satisfaction, like, oh, I'm home. I'm safe. I've already been asleep for hours. I'm going to be asleep for hours more. This is a great way and great place to be.
I love that about being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous is that it's totally changed my sleep schedule. And I love waking up early and going to bed early. And it just is what it is. It felt really uncomfortable at first because I was, of course, the opposite. And I stayed out really late. And then it just slowly started changing. And at this stage of life, it's being sober, A, and then B, just being older, that if I go to work dinners all the time. It's part of my job. That like when the espresso martinis come out to the dinner table, I used to like want to stay and I had like FOMO and I would stay there. Like I'm still normal. I can still stay out late and blah, blah, blah when I first stopped drinking. And now it's just almost fun it's exciting. Like, oh, it's time to go home and go to sleep now. Y'all have fun. I'll cover the check. Like, bye, I'm out of here. But it's interesting how that's happened. And I've been on my journey for almost 10 years now. And I took a little time off. I took like a year and a half off and back on. But that feels good. And I'm glad. I want to talk about that a little more too once we get there. But so then you moved back to Dallas.
Yes, I moved back to Dallas in 2003 after the start of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was really heartbroken by a boy, but also by the news. And like, I was done with international news. I really felt like journalists had been somewhat complicit in building the case for this unjust war. And now we know America's longest war. So I thought I was done for good with the news. And I spent the summer reviewing luxury hotels in Hawaii. And then I got a job at KERA covering local news. And that was a sweet spot because it was all politics are local and I could still, bring change to bear to my city from the inside. So that was where I started forming strong opinions about municipal government. But being a reporter, I wasn't supposed to act on them because we were supposed to stay neutral.
Right.
So then when I went into the private sector with Encore Electric Delivery, I got the chance to be appointed to the Cultural Affairs Commission, and I jumped at the chance because I had formed strong opinions about government from being a neutral observer and was excited to play a more active role.
Yeah.
And then subsequent to that was executive director of the Dallas Arts District, and my husband started a record label, State Fair Records, which we were part of for 8 years, and I got appointed by the city council to the board of Dallas Area Rapid Transit, which has the extra bonus benefit of us getting free DART for life now as a former board member.
Do you take advantage?
You know it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think the DART is going to lose money on me personally just because the longer I live here, the more I'm going to use it. So that's pretty great. To go to the airports and to go to Mavs games and to get to work, it's wonderful. And then when the world shut down and we were betwixt and between New York and Dallas, I got the chance to work for Dallas. So now I'm a member of the deep state.
Are you going to run for mayor?
Oh, kind sentiment. And I will, I think, take that as a compliment, but no, thank you.
I just feel like it would be appropriate.
Oh, you're very kind. It's a very hard job to have 1.3 million bosses, and I like serving as an appointed leader rather than an elected official because I don't want to raise money and I don't want to sling mud, and I can just be a public servant. And really my ministry now is to my fellow public servants, all of whom are working more than full time for less than market pay and getting bullied sometimes by the press or politicians or the public. And I just am there to say, contrary to everyone who thinks that you're fat that needs to be trimmed or bloat or waste or whatever the cool kids are calling it these days, like, you're providing an essential service, and I'm glad to be your colleague, and I'm glad to work for and with you and live in a city where you're doing this good work. So that's my jam.
I love that. How did you start dating Paul Williams, my good friend.
Oh my goodness!
From the way back, your husband Paul produced my seminal record with Slick 57. They got us signed to a record deal, enabled me to quit my job and go tour with the band with John Pedigo, my best friend from high school, for work for 4 years. I mean, so that's like a really special memory of mine. I was working my first job out of college, like 8 to 5, but right after work, we were always playing shows on the weekends, and went up to Last Beat and recorded with Paul in 2002. So that was before you moved back, I guess.
Yes.
And anyway, we've obviously like been in the music scene. I'm pretty much on the fringe of it at this stage, so I don't see him quite as much. But how did you guys start dating? I don't remember that.
Do you want the PG or the R-rated version?
R-rated. This is Truckin' on.
Okay. Well, we'll just have to mark that as explicit content so that my sister's children don't listen to it until they're at least 16 years old.
Yeah.
So Paul Williams and I met at the Kessler Theater.
Okay.
And James Driscoll, a mastering guru in town and the bassist in Shibboleth, among other great bands, was standing right next to us. And
Chomsky.
Yes. And Paul said, "Hey, I'm Paul." And I said, "Hey, I'm Catherine." And James is like, "You two know each other." And we were pretty sure we had not met, even though we have been in the same place at the same time since at least the Calling All Nations concert at Texas Stadium with INXS, Guns N' Roses, Ziggy Marley, Iggy Pop, and the Smithereens.
And what year was that?
That was when I was in junior high and Paul Williams was in college. So it's good we did not meet then.
Yeah.
But that was the first of many concerts and friend times we'd been together, because I had known Carter Albrecht since I was 19, and Carter was one of Paul's nearest and dearest friends, and Paul made records for Sorta. And so clearly we were both at Carter's memorial when he passed away, and later Paul and I were on the Carter Albrecht Music Foundation board together. But all to say, we hit it off, and then we were Facebook official. That was kind of a thing to be at that time. What's your status in a relationship? And when we became friends on Facebook, we had hundreds of friends in common.
Right.
Like, we'd both been in the music scene in Dallas since the 1900s. And thanks a lot, friend, for knowing him and knowing me and not introducing us. We're tall, we're single, we're liberal. Where you been? Thanks a lot, man. Anyway.
It makes perfect sense. It's like you being mayor.
You're too kind.
Yeah,
but seriously, I gotta give a little bit of grief to people who knew us both and didn't introduce us.
James Driscoll did the work.
He just happened to be standing by, and actually when Shibboleth played a show at the Kessler within the past year and we walked in, James had just sent a message like, "I'm standing in the spot where you two met." So
that's awesome.
Yes. So Paul and I brought more than 80 years of life experience to our first trip down the aisle. Neither of us had been married before.
Yeah.
And I had been in an on and off again relationship with someone who was divorced, and happily so. I wanted to be married, was still very much looking forward to that, and that was just a recipe for disaster. So Paul and I had a date scheduled the day my nephew was born. My nephew, who will be 15 this April. And my sister had this tremendously hard delivery. Like, she labored for 40 hours and then had an emergency C-section. So I'd been up at the hospital with her, and she'd literally spilled her guts for this kiddo, and it all worked out, but it was touch and go there for a minute. So then Paul was like, "Well, do you want to reschedule?" I'm like, no, we'll get together. We'll hang out. But seeing how my brother-in-law, who has been in our family for 22 years now, was taking care of my sister and their newborn at that moment, I just got very direct with Paul very early in the relationship. Like, "Hey, man, if you don't believe in monogamy or just want to hop in the sack, this is going to be our last date. Like, I think you're awesome. I'll see you at shows. We're going to be friends for sure. But I know that I want to be in a committed relationship. So if you're allergic to marriage, just don't waste my time." And Paul Williams said, "Well, that does put things on the fast track. But I've been waiting a long time for you.
Wow.
Wow. So then we were off to the races. So I was living with a roommate at the time in a house. My roommate was a coworker of mine. He had an ex-girlfriend who kind of was not well. And she fixated on me and thought I was the reason they had broken up. And I was at Paul Williams's house in Pleasant Grove one night, and she started texting me saying she was going to slash my tires and break my windows. And Paul said, hey, I have a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom house. You're about to buy a condo. Why don't we wait until daylight, go back to your house. You can go with me to get what you need, and you can stay here until you buy your condo. Like, this woman is off her rocker. She's got you in her crosshairs. Like, that's a bad situation. So you're just going to live with me until you move into your own place.
Is that scary?
Yes.
Had you ever experienced something like that before?
No, nor since. And I honestly, I don't know how she's doing. I worry for her. Like, she was truly fragile.
Yeah.
But I mean, basically Paul and I were like shacking up in the early days of our relationship until I got my own condo that summer. 4th of July, it was, 200 degrees outside, and he helped me move into my place because he's a sweetie pie. And then we didn't live together again until we were married. But that was very like Prince Charming of him to rescue me from a dangerous person. And it was a lot of fun. Like, we had a big party at his house for Memorial Day, big pool party. You might have been there.
I don't think so.
John Pettigo was definitely there, Chad Stockschlager. And another thing that won my heart was, like, we had this all-day grilling, drinking, people everywhere, swimming, family-friendly, day-to-night party. And it ended, and I was like, oh, my gosh, we can clean this up tomorrow. And he said, oh, no, before I go to bed tonight, it will be like it never happened. And I was like, what? And he was like, I'm on it. And he like rolled up his sleeves, took out the trash, loaded the dishwasher, vacuumed. And it was like it never happened. Like, he did not rest until the house was spick and span and spotless. And
I like that move. I did not used to be like that. Well, when I've quit drinking, I'm now like that, where I just kind of clean. Like, cleaning's important to me, and it used to be very not important to me. So,
and now when I go to parties, I also find not drinking, I can be the person who like clears some empty plates. It's a good place.
One of my favorite people to have at a party is that person. My mom's like that. She'll, like, when she comes over, it's really nice. And I'm have my kids and doing all that, but she's like doing it. It's like, oh my gosh, that's such a nice little lift. So,
yeah. So Paul and I went from like dating to committed to living together to dating again. But with marriage on the mind. So we dated about 9 months. We were engaged about 9 months.
Nice.
And that was 2011. I remember it as the year I got married, and Paul Williams remembers it as the year the Mavs won the championship.
That's right. I remember that.
In fact, the Rangers also won the pennant to go to the World Series the night we got married. And at our wedding reception, I was trying to introduce to my family my new husband, and I turned around and he was leading our wedding guests in a chant of "Let's go Rangers" and watching television at our wedding reception.
That's pretty good. Good wife. So let's see. What advice would you give to your younger self looking back?
Probably no advice I would have given my younger self. I would have taken, because I thought I knew all there was to know and was a people-pleasing perfectionist. And my advice would probably be to lighten up and not sweat the small stuff and just go easier on myself. I was, and still am, my own harshest critic, and quieting that voice that is so self-critical is a lifelong practice that I get better at with practice.
Yeah. Being aware is the first step, right?
Right. But I definitely turned myself inside out trying to compensate. For me, there was a lot of shame, and a lot of shame that I was medicating with alcohol, and then being drunk led to more bad decisions that I was ashamed of. So that was a pretty messy spiral, and I'm glad to not be on that roller coaster anymore.
The vicious cycle of it, the shame and the drink and the exponential shame and thinking the drinking's going to make it stop. Oh my gosh. I always thought of myself as a man with an anxiety disorder, and that's why I drank. And I did not really identify shame as a culprit until my last go around. And when I got sober the last time, then it hit me like, whoa, I have this shame problem. Like shame's like my
Kryptonite.
My little brother that's been with me for as long as I can remember. And it's a strange relationship when you get used to having shame in your life all of the time, because it just begins to feel normal. And then it's like, well, what does it feel like if the shame's gone? Like it can kind of be scary, even though on paper it sounds great to not have shame, but it's something that I've really had to work through the last year and a half, and identifying it as this like hidden culprit of how I was just suffering through that for so long. It is, I think it's really something that everyone alive struggles with to some degree. Right. But once I became aware of it, I'm the shame transmuter these days.
Well, I'm sorry that you were struggling with that. I'm so glad that you have found a way to work through it. And I have a friend who's an Episcopalian priest. She used to be at St. Michael and All Angels. Now she's in Little Rock. But one of her quotes that I love is she says, we only need enough shame to not go to the grocery store naked. And that's like just the right amount of shame, like put your robe on before you bring the paper in from the front yard and you're good. Like,
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. So, what's the greatest obstacle that you've overcome?
Well, my journey to sobriety started because I have a congenital vision birth defect that was causing me to go blind. So I first had surgery to correct it in 1986 when I was 11, and then I had a subsequent surgery in 2007. And in the month that followed, Carter Albrecht passed away, Glenn Mitchell, my colleague at KERA, passed away, and my friend Lee passed away from breast cancer. And I was drowning my sorrows about those things with alcohol, and it was compounding my double vision and headaches. And when I talked to my eye surgeon about it, he said, do you get enough sleep? And I said, well, on the weekends. And he said, you need to go to bed early enough every night that you can wake up in the morning without setting an alarm clock, which was a huge change of life for me. And then he asked, do you drink alcohol? And I said, I'm a journalist. And
yeah, right.
He's like, yeah, and you'll need to stop that too. And then if you're still having double vision and headaches, we'll talk. And it is a good Dallas surgeon who tells you what you don't want to hear and doesn't take your money for a surgery you don't need when the solution to your health problem is within your control.
That's right.
So I did not immediately heed his advice. I cut back on my drinking, but I was still having double vision and headaches, and I went for a follow-up exam. And he said, and you're getting enough sleep? And I said, uh-huh. And he said, and you quit drinking? And I said, cut back. And he said, why are you effing around with one of your five senses? Do you have one to spare? And I realized I did not. And so
this is a great doctor.
Yes, he
right
is.
here.
Dr. Matthew Lippis at Sweeney Eye Care. And so for that, I am ever so grateful. And then that's when I got with the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which only requires that you have a desire to stop drinking, because I did have that desire, but I wasn't doing so well on my own. And once I found other people who had been down that path and they shared their experience, strength, and hope, I was able to order a Dr. Pepper with my hot dog at the ball game instead of a beer, or order a agua fresca with my Tex-Mex instead of a margarita, and it was an easy switch, but I just hadn't been my first impulse, in part because I grew up in a family of restaurateurs where alcohol consumption was not only normalized but celebrated. My cousin Mariano invented the frozen margarita machine, and I had a Bud Light on tap neon sign in my childhood playroom. So like our family was all about the spirits. And once I reprogrammed, and I will say also, because she talked about going out, like trying to do it myself didn't work. Getting sponsored and working the steps really made all the difference.
How long did you try on your own?
I tried on my own before I had my vision problems. Like I would give up alcohol for Lent.
Yeah. Successfully?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
In fact, I went to South by Southwest as a journalist from 95 to 2005. And it was usually during Lent. And it was very aggravating because like the kegs were free flowing, but you had to pay $10 for a bottle of water.
Right.
But I was a lot cuter then, so guys were usually willing to bring me a bottle of water, and they would do the buying. And I tried on my own in Alcoholics Anonymous, but without a sponsor, in the spring of 2008, and then I went to a wedding for my cousin in Switzerland on my birthday, and I just had to have a glass of champagne for my birthday because at that point I couldn't imagine if this were the last night of my life. It was actually Prosecco, not champagne. I was like, if this were the last night of my life, I wouldn't want to forego alcohol. And now it's like, if this were the last night of my life, I would not want to be messed up. So
for sure.
In any event, I came back from that trip, and the main symptom of my inebriation or exhaustion, when I'm tired or tipsy, my bad eye goes looking for trouble. And that's when I have the double vision and headaches. And so the last night I had drinks was at a Mount Righteous show at Rubber Gloves in Denton, Texas. And I drove home with one hand over my eye so that I could see the road straight all the way back to Oak Cliff. And I was like, this is stupid. And that was that.
That's amazing.
Thankfully, I did not have a field sobriety test on that hour-long drive home because with my wonky eye, I might not have been able to follow the pen light or whatever. But
right. Well, I appreciate you always being there for me through my journey, and you reached out to me immediately. I've always been very vocal about the benefits of quitting drinking, even though I have fallen off the wagon twice during this journey, I guess. But right when I quit one time, the first time cold turkey, and immediately did this like
Ironman, right? Or
yeah, I did 2 Ironmans that year when I was sober, but Nicole Stewart, do you remember?
Of course.
And she had this thing where people would go speak at it.
Yes.
I forget what it's called.
The Oral Fixation Show.
Oral Fixation Show.
An Obsession with True Life Tales, which we both spoke at on different topics.
Yeah, that's right. And so, and I spoke about, I don't even know how I got connected to her.
Cold turkey was the topic.
Yeah, and you reached out to me maybe because I had mentioned it to you. I don't know. But yeah, I got on stage and talked about the benefits of quitting drinking. I'd never gone to a meeting or sought any help or therapy whatsoever at that stage. And so I quit for 1 year. And then like, I quit for a year. I've got this under control. And then the next 2.5 years, I mean, it was a like wicked relapse where I don't know that I could have gone harder than I was before, but it went harder, and then quit again. The last time wasn't like that. It didn't like whipsaw me like that. That one after my first year of sobriety, I at least had a lot of tools after 6.5 years of not drinking. The last time where I stayed pretty mindful, but also mindful enough where I logged every drink during that year. And you watch the graph just go up. My tolerance just goes up. And I was really good at the beginning at not waking up in the morning and feeling like shit. And then it eventually led to more and more nights of that. And like knowing that I'm very intoxicated at a business conference, breaking every rule I set out not to break when I decided to start drinking again. And then finally, thankfully, was able to quit again. So, but you're always there for me. And I appreciate that. Gone to meetings with me, and
it's true. Anytime. It's my pleasure.
And just also there's something about just knowing that you're there.
We're everywhere.
It's not like you and I talk about it all the time, but I see you on social media land and see what you're doing. And I'm like, I know you're doing that and you're living your best version of your life because of this. And that's inspiring. Thank you.
And that's the 12th step, is carrying the message. So good on you.
That's right. Just be the message, right? So let's see what else I have here. Have you ever had a mystical experience?
Yes. Now, I have read my mother's mind when I was a toddler. I had symptoms of my congenital birth defect that I thought were like the visitations of angels that were actually my retinas detaching, which I experienced like a personal meteor shower indoors. And I thought like the Holy Spirit was raining on me, but it was actually going blind. So that demystifies the mystical experience.
Granted, there's no evidence to the contrary that it could have been.
That's true. That's true. It just happens to have similar descriptions. I mean, one of the things that was the most awe-inspiring experiences was my mother-in-law's funeral during the partial solar eclipse of 2017. I don't know if you remember that August, but my mother-in-law passed and was to be buried at the military cemetery in Cedar Hill. And it was August. We were wearing black. It was outdoors. It was 1 p.m. Like, the only way it could have been hotter is if we were on the surface of the sun. And I don't know if you've ever been to a funeral at the National Cemetery, but they have them scheduled in 15-minute increments. Like, there's a trumpet player, he's playing taps, in they go, off you go.
Yeah.
So they have you queued up behind the limousines in these parallel parking spaces while you're waiting your turn. And suddenly the sky grew dark. The birds stopped chirping. My sister-in-law passed out the eclipse glasses. It got like 10 degrees cooler just while we were sitting there. And it was breathtaking. And not something we had known when we scheduled her memorial at that hour, although my sister-in-law had clearly realized that was going to happen and came prepared.
Yeah, she got the glasses.
But after that, I became quite enamored of eclipse viewing. And this year, my 50th year, has been spectacular because I got to see 2 eclipses. One, the weekend of Paul and Mai's wedding anniversary in Corpus Christi, the so-called Ring of Fire eclipse. And then...
Was that in April last year?
No, April was the totality in Dallas.
Yeah.
So the prior October of 2023, there was a Ring of Fire eclipse.
That's right.
And as soon as I realized there was going to be a total eclipse in Dallas in 2024, which is the year that everyone I graduated high school with and everyone I graduated college with was turning 50, I let everyone I was still friends with from high school and college know, hey, here's how we're celebrating our 50th birthday. Come to Dallas. My house will be base camp, and it'll be spectacular. And my friends showed up from Spain, from Canada, from coast to coast.
Wow.
It was awesome. And then the forecast said it might be rainy that day. And one of my friends actually canceled because her husband was like, we can't pull the kids out of school and pay $1 zillion to fly and not see this eclipse, which I understand. But then the clouds parted and we got to see the eclipse. But just to make sure that like a good time was had by all, even if we couldn't see the eclipse, we had a dance party in my backyard on Saturday night, DJ'd by the late, great DJ Mr. Mark Ridlin, who also was the DJ at my wedding. Sunday, we had a big brunch, so that was like kid and family friendly. And then Monday, we had a pizza party and watched When the Moon Hits Your Eye Like a Big Pizza Pie. That's eclipse day.
That was a mystical experience.
It sure was.
For everyone who saw it.
Yes.
I was in my backyard and it was so cool.
I was in my backyard eating pizza with my friends. And also, thanks to rock and roll producer and photographer Mike Dane, who had done this in 2017, I put disco balls out, and the light of the sun hitting the disco ball projected the eclipse everywhere around.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Good thinking.
I have a lot of disco ball things for that, should you need it for another one. And the next eclipse is in Spain, and I still have a bunch of glasses. So if anybody's going, I got some glasses.
You're
for
not
you.
going?
If the last 5 years have taught me anything, I do not know what the future holds. So
Yeah.
we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Love that.
It would be great to go, but I might be out of vacation days by then. We'll see.
What's your favorite restaurant?
Nowadays, probably La Calle Doce. My grandfather started it on 12th Street, which is what Calle Doce means in Spanish. And I love the Sanchez family that owns it. And I feel great about supporting it. And I feel like I'm with family when I go there to eat.
Yeah. Do they still have the one on Skillman and Live Oak?
They do. I had lunch there Sunday after church with my family.
I haven't been there in a long time.
It had a fire, but they're back.
Yeah, good. That's a great spot.
Mexican seafood.
Yeah. Let's see. What's your favorite vacation destination?
I have been very fortunate to have traveled to all continents except Antarctica. And with my beloved Paul Williams, we have traveled from the Arctic Circle in midnight sun in summertime to Australia in winter when that was the longest flight on Earth. We flew coach. We still love each other. I have not been with him. I will say I have been blessed by my not burning bridges to have had some of the best house sitting gigs in the world. So the year Paul turned 50, we got a house sitting gig in Berlin, Germany. In 2022, we had a house sitting gig for the summer in Altadena, California, which nobody knew of, and now they do because of the fires that just happened there.
Okay.
My old boss, with whom I was the publicist for Chicago, and Sheila Ian Roxette, lives in Oregon, and he and his wife have an extra loft in Portland, downtown Portland, Oregon, the first warehouse in downtown Portland that got turned into warehouses, where Katie Lang lives, and we got to stay there for free for vacation a little bit ago. And so, yeah, I would say my favorite vacation destination is the free one where I can stay for a long time.
Seriously, you've hacked it.
I have. I've got the
Sounds
life
like
hack.
it.
Yeah, I'm a trustworthy. That was another one of my part-time jobs I didn't even talk about when I talked about all the jobs I had that in my early Hollywood reporter days. One of my house sitting clients was the location scout for Lord of the Rings movies and Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe, Chronicles of Narnia movies. So when she was off scouting locations in New Zealand, I was feeding her cats, drinking her wine. But yeah, those are my favorite vacation destinations where I can like stay long enough to pretend like I live there.
That's so cool. What about a book? What book would you recommend that people read?
I have so many to recommend.
Are you a big reader?
I am. I used to host a literary author interview series when I was at KERA called The Writer's Studio, and I got to interview all kinds of writers from Eric Bogosian to Louise Erdrich to Ann Patchett. I got to interview Fran Lebowitz a couple months ago at the Eisman Center in Richardson as a result of that. And she's a scream, but she only wrote 2 books, and she wrote them decades ago, but I highly recommend her. Fiction, nonfiction. I would say one of the greatest books is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's incredible.
That's a John Pedigo recommendation. I love that.
Yeah, and apparently, I mean, it's just now been adapted to the screen because his estate required that it never be licensed for a screen production unless it were in Spanish. They did not want it to be in English. But not a lot of dialogue happens in those books. So it's I haven't watched the show because the book means so much to me, like The Theater of the Mind. I don't know. A similar book written by a woman, Carol Shields, The Stone Diaries, is also kind of intergenerational. From a nonfiction perspective, a book that I often recommend by an author named Anand Giridharadas is called Winners Take All. And it's about the importance of government and nonprofit and that the private sector can't do everything. And I would have recommended it before, but it's also apt in these times. And a fun one that Paul and I read together. You mentioned you wrote an autobiography. What's the title of your autobiography? Do you know?
I'm working on that.
So I just finished the autobiography of Griffin Dunn called The Friday Afternoon Club. That was really fun. Paul's a big fan of autobiographies. I highly recommend the one by Keith Richards if you haven't read it.
I have.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
His memory is astonishing.
It's really good. It's called Life or something.
Yep.
Yeah. Willie Nelson has some amazing ones. I went to rehab and read Willie Nelson. It's a long story there. It reminds me of Keith Richards kind of.
Excellent. Yeah. I love Joan Didion. She's one of my favorite authors ever. So her short story collections, Sloshing Towards Bethlehem and the White Album, her autobiography, The Year of Magical Thinking. There's so much good reading to be done, and yet I have so zoned out of late. I'm singing and dancing more than I'm reading. That's where my joy comes from.
That's amazing.
Singing in the choir, dancing.
Church choir?
Church choir in the summertime and college choir during the school year for a concert coming up at the end of the year. And much like your high school choir director, my college choir director passed away in 1998, and this fellow choir member of mine who's conducting the concert I'm singing at the end of this April conducted the college choir at our choir director's funeral.
Okay.
So it's like this legacy and the circle of life and a mystical experience to have. Like, I watch this classmate of mine conducting and I see our choir director's life in him.
Yeah.
In a really magical way. But yeah, church choir this summer, my dad and I sang at First Presbyterian Church of Dallas. They're so happy to have warm bodies on Sunday mornings that if you show up at 10, you can sing at 11. So you have like 1 hour to learn notes and counting and words. And my dad is not a member of my church. He's a 24-karat Catholic. But just for the joy of father-daughter singing, which was as wholesome as it sounds, we sang together and it was a great experience. And
that's so cool.
Yeah.
That actually happened at Miss Bircher's funeral. Is a guy I went to high school with had taken over that job at Woodrow. He no longer does it, but he conducted all of us. So.
Cool. That's another mystical experience. Have you ever been to Tuba Christmas?
No.
Okay.
Tuba Christmas?
Tuba Christmas, 12 noon on Christmas Eve or the business day prior to Christmas Eve. If Christmas falls on a Saturday or Sunday, Christmas Eve falls on a Saturday or Sunday. Thanksgiving Square, downtown Dallas, 300 tubas, sing along to all the most popular Christmas carols you can name.
Really?
It's a 1 hour noon concert.
That sounds amazing.
For the downtown workers who have to keep the lights on at the holidays. And it is Paul Williams' favorite holiday thing to do. And it is pretty spectacular to hear the booming bells of 300 tubas echoing off all the downtown skyscrapers and just this band of who knows who that happens to stumble out of their office or hotel room all singing the same hymns. It's pretty great.
I love that.
Yeah. And then I'm a member of Dallas Park and Recreation Kids Springs Rec Center by my house, and I go to Zumba twice a week there. And I'm like an aqua fitness swimmer in the summer. And like, I love my park and rec department, $15 a year. It's like living by a country club. It's fabulous. So that's where my joy comes from. Singing, dancing, biking, and reading.
I love it. What is a cause or like a charity that you're passionate about?
So I'm passionate about arts and culture and public education and a healthy environment.
Yeah. Do you have are there any like organizations that you want to direct people towards?
One that comes to mind this very day is Amplified Minds, formerly the Foundation 45, just recently rebranded. And I'm going to a meeting with them today for 24 Hour Dallas, which is the nonprofit advocacy group that's a counterpart to the Convention Event Services Nighttime Economy Responsible Hospitality Division I work in. Also a group called Livogy that distributes and trains people on how to spot the signs of opioid overdose and administer Narcan to prevent overdose deaths. So those are some...
Lauren was just on Truckin' On.
Excellent.
She was 2 guests ago.
Great.
And comes out today if Logan gets it done.
Terrific. And Tammy Thompson, who's on their board of directors, is working with me on the Dallas Music Office Committee, but she and Paul Williams also worked together at State Fair Records in the day.
I need to get
not State Fair, sorry. They did work together at State Fair, but they first worked together at Last Beat.
Yeah. I need to get your help getting both of them on here.
Okay.
That would be so fantastic to get Tammy and Paul. And that's all I got today, Catherine.
Well, lucky me. Thanks, friend.
Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
I know you're super busy, and it means a lot to me. So it was amazing to catch up. And
likewise.
Trade some life stories.
Indeed. Keep up the good work.
Thanks for trucking on. Peace.
Thanks for having me.